Hey, Bright Lights, it's Angela. Welcome back to the Space Doctor series on the Architecting channel. And today we are doing March 2025 predictions. So, this is your chance to really set a theme for a topic to look into throughout this month to really be much more aware of in the spaces that you either live, work, and play in or are designing. I am an architect and feng shui practitioner who has spent my whole career studying something called salutogenesis or design for well being. Therefore, I know how important this is. But I also know that this is a lot of research based work, a lot of dry technical things, and it doesn't feel real to a lot of people, even other architects and interior designers. So I've made it my mission to demystify this, really unlock the science behind this design, to give you easy ways to understand scientific theories and even more, how to put them to practice in your own living spaces, community, or projects that you are working on. So to do this, I developed a deck of cards that have all these theories on them. And each week I draw a card from the two sections of the deck. The foundational concepts, which are theories that represent what creates well-being in our life or depletes it, as well as a section that represents the 5 different theories that my research has shown are the aspects that are the core of salutogenesis. Each of these aspects is also associated with a feng shui element. So I will draw one card from each section of the deck, and the way that they pair will determine how I talk about them. So you're definitely going to want to like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss an episode. And this is really brought out by the fact that the card I drew from the foundational concepts section of the deck is neuroplasticity. Now, if you were watching back in January, you would have seen that I got this card twice in a row. And if you watched the weekly reading for this week, you would see that I also drew this card. And yet, if you listen to what I had to say, you would find that I said something different about the card just because of the other card that it was paired with. So, a quick review in case you have not heard any of those episodes. Neuroplasticity is essentially our brain's ability to rewire itself. So every brain cell has neurons, and those neurons connect together as we experience our life. And neurons that wire together and fire together become stronger and stronger connections. So our brain is kind of lazy and looks to create shortcuts all the time. And so we have thoughts, beliefs, habits that we are usually not even aware that we have because they have become automatic. However, we can change them. And that's really powerful. So, used to be that they thought only infants and young children had neuroplastic brains, and that the rest of us, once we got to a certain age, were stuck the way we were. However, more recent studies have shown that no matter how old you are, you have the ability to change the way the neurons in your brain fire. In fact, certain life experiences like high stress or trauma events will actually kill off some of those neurons, and they can grow back because of neuroplasticity. There have also been some really cool studies of people in ICUs. And those studies showed that when you are taking a lot of drugs and laying in bed and not doing anything, there's a loss of neural activity. So, neuroplasticity is really important. We want to have our environment be something that is engaging for us all the time, something that has a lot of positive associations, something that allows us to stay curious throughout our lives and make new connections, new discoveries, improve and evolve as human beings, form better habits. That's the real value of neuroplasticity. Now, the card that I drew from the aspects part of the deck comes from the sense of coherence aspect. So, sense of coherence was the very first theory that was ever associated with the idea of salutogenesis. The term salutogenesis was coined by a medical sociologist named Aaron Antonovsky. And he noticed that people did have different outcomes when they were faced with certain life events based on the resources they had to cope. And as he began to evolve more into his research, he particularly identified a theory called sense of coherence, which is how meaningful, manageable, and comprehensible our space is. But I do want to point out, because a lot of people think that sense of coherence is salutogenesis, even though Aaron Antonovsky did both, he coined both terms, studied both, he himself acknowledged that there was more to salutogenesis than just sense of coherence and encouraged other people doing work around design for well-being to think about how it worked with his concept of resources to cope and salutogenesis. Now, sense of coherence is associated with the feng shui metal element, logic, with the intellect, with rational thinking, with how we draw conclusions and put things together. So the card that I drew is confirmation bias. And you can see in the image, what we're looking at is something that unfortunately a lot of people might be kind of familiar with, a very stressful classroom situation. And in this case, through the eyes of a student who's maybe had some traumatic experiences that were very stressful in the classroom. And all of those very, very typical, highly recognizable elements like rows of desks, the chalkboard, it's all becoming hyper focused on failure and inability to take tests and to do well. And that is causing then the expectation that the next time the same outcome will happen. And that happens a lot in spaces that we encounter. Most people, when they talk about confirmation bias, will get into things like political beliefs. And certainly that is one way to think about it, right? If we like something or have a positive opinion of something or someone, we will only see the good. And if we don't like something or someone, we will only see the bad. That is the bias. But it can happen in environments as well. So a lot of people, I work in healthcare, really don't like healthcare environments. Why is that? Well, most people don't associate a healthcare environment with well-being. They associate it with some kind of health crisis or problem. They may have had a family member or themselves been seriously ill, had even somebody die in a healthcare setting. And so every time they think about any kind of healthcare setting, all of those negative experiences come up. Maybe they have to get tested and they're not sure what's going to happen and they're afraid to learn what's going to happen. And so, again, that fear of what could go wrong is also associated with that healthcare environment. And just like I showed on the card, the example of the classroom, you could probably think of other places and spaces that you may have had a very negative experience in. And now, when you think about that space or a space that is similar to it, you immediately have the confirmation bias related to your negative experience. So you don't see the things that are good in the space or the resources that are available to you, you only see the things that to you have negative associations. It means that we want to try to pattern interrupt, and we want to think about how we could introduce a different symbol, a different association by changing the expectation that we have. For example, if you have a very negative association with a classroom, and now as an adult you need to get some training, but all of those experiences from your mean high school math teacher come back up again, what if the place where you were taking training didn't look like a typical classroom? What if it looked more like a lounge? What if the teacher didn't work from the front of the room in this authority figure position, but instead was walking around interacting with you? What if there weren't desks? What if you worked at little side tables, right? There's a lot of ways to think about this where this would be a pattern interrupt to the negative expectations and associations you were bringing with you, the confirmation bias, and therefore cause you to be more open to what could be positive resources for you in that space. So, as we pair together these two cards, there's a lot of really great associations we can make between them. So, with neuroplasticity and confirmation bias, we can start to say, what do we know about what the people who are going to be in this space are going to expect? What positive things are they going to bring with them? What negative expectations are they going to have? What can we do to pattern interrupt, to leverage the power of neuroplasticity, to greet them with something that is more dynamic, more unexpected, that maybe even forces them to use the space in a different way? So, like in that classroom example, when you're sitting at a desk facing forward, your behavior and the way that you work in that room is very different than if you're sitting on a couch and able to work on a tablet. So we've already created a different way of using the space, of moving through the space, of engaging in learning, just because we've set the space up in a different way. And as you come into that training, then every week or however often it is, and you're in that very different non-classroom setting, your brain rewires and starts to make some very different associations about learning that are hopefully then more positive, so that you have a good experience, you're successful, and maybe the next time you have training or you're studying for a certification or something like that, it doesn't feel so scary. And now you can start to imitate that same posture maybe in your own home when you're studying, and start to get better results because you've leveraged neuroplasticity. So I hope that this was useful information to you, and I'd love to hear how you are changing your home or work environment or your projects as a result of what you learned today. Make sure that you like and subscribe so that you get a notification every time I do a new episode. And I will see you next time, and have a great month.